Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to do my review of Survivor Series 1992. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is High Energy versus the Head Shrinkers. Number one, I thought it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both teams with High Energy keeping the pace of the match. But the Head Shrinkers ultimately hit the finish on High Energy, pinning them for the three. And your winners of the match are the Head Shrinkers. Hats off to the Head Shrinkers for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Nails versus Big Boss Man. I thought it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Nails and Big Boss Man, with Nails keeping the pace of the match. But Boss Man ultimately hits his signature Boss Man slam on Nails, pinning him for the three, and your winner of the match is the Big Boss Man. Hats off to the Big Boss Man for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Rick Martel versus Tantaka. I thought it was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Martel and Tantaka, with Tantaka keeping the pace of the match. And Tantaka ultimately hits the finish on Rick Martel, pinning him for the three, and your winner of the match is Tantaka. Hats off to Tantaka for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Randy Savage and Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. Again, I thought this was a great matchup, back and forth matchup between both teams, with Randy and Mr. Perfect keeping the pace of the match. But Randy and Mr. Perfect ultimately get the win by disqualification. Hats off to Randy Savage and Mr. Perfect for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Yokozuna versus Virgil. Again, this was a relatively fast-paced match. It was an okay matchup. At first, Yokozuna was keeping the pace of the match, and then Yokozuna ultimately hits his signature bonsai drop on Virgil, pinning him for the three, and your winner of the match is Yokozuna. Hats off to Yokozuna for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Natural Disasters and the Nasty Boys versus Money Inc. and the Beverly Brothers. I thought it was an okay matchup. Again, back and forth matchup between both the Natural Disasters, the Nasty Boys, and Money Inc. and Beverly Brothers, with the Natural Disasters and the Nasty Boys keeping the pace of the match. But Jerry Sags ultimately hits a roll-up, pins for the three, and your winners of the match are the Natural Disasters and the Nasty Boys. Hats off to the Natural Disaster and the Nasty Boys for getting a win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is The Undertaker versus Kamala in a coffin match. Again, this was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between Taker and Kamala, with Taker keeping the pace of the match. But Taker ultimately throws Kamala into the coffin, and your winner of the match is The Undertaker. Again, hats off to The Undertaker for getting a win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of Survivor Series 1992. It is Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWE Championship. It was a great matchup, back and forth matchup between both Shawn and Bret Hart, with Shawn Michaels keeping the pace of the match. But Bret ultimately gets the win. Again, hats off to Bret for getting the win in this matchup. A couple things I'm going to say about Survivor Series 1992. Number one, there wasn't a lot of great matches for Survivor Series 1992. There was a couple matches that I did not mind. Number one was the tag match between Randy Savage and Mr. Perfect teaming up against Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. Again, phenomenal tag team matchup. Then you have Undertaker and Kamala. And the reason why I say this match is interesting is because Taker, me personally as a fan, I am not a big fan of the gimmick matches. I never have been, I never will be. And some of the matches that were gimmick matches were probably some of the worst matches that we've ever seen. Especially some of the matches they had in WCW with their gimmick matches. It was just downright horrendous. But Taker is that one guy to me as a fan that is the only guy that can have these gimmick matches and pull them off and go, awesome. The coffin matches, the Boiler Room match they had with Mankind, which was absolutely awesome. And then you had the Buried Alive matches, which, obviously Raw and SmackDown did years later. But this was awesome. As far as Kamala as a competitor, Kamala, to me, and rest in peace to Kamala, by the way, I feel like he wasn't a wrestler's wrestler. I think Kamala was based around gimmick. And Kamala had a perfect gimmick. So did Taker. And Taker is going to be forever, etched in stone with WWE for his gimmick and the work that he has done under the WWE banner. But he's the only person, in my honest opinion, that could have a gimmick match and it be a fantastic match, man. Because some of those gimmick matches, like I stated earlier, especially for like WCW and even WWE, some of those gimmick matches were just downright horrendous, man, and they just were not needed. Lazy booking, lackadaisical storyline telling, it just wasn't there. And I just feel like the matches were there, those gimmick matches were there to fill a void because they didn't really know how to book the show, in my honest opinion. But like I said, Taker is the only wrestler ever that could have a gimmick match and make it a fantastic match. So hats off to The Undertaker for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of Survivor Series 1992. It is Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart for the WWE Championship. I thought this was a great matchup. A lot of history between both Shawn and Bret Hart years down the line. Everybody knows about the whole thing that happened in Montreal that pretty much changed both Shawn and Bret Hart's career. So a lot of history there, especially years down the road. But the match itself, a back and forth matchup between both Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, with Shawn Michaels keeping the pace of the match. But Bret Hart ultimately secures the win. So hats off to Bret Hart for getting the win in that matchup. But a couple of things I'll say about Survivor Series 1992 is that I don't think there was a lot of really good matches on this card, in my honest opinion. The other thing is that you have, a couple matches, like the tag team match, Ric Flair, Mr. Perfect, and obviously again going up against Razor Ramon and Ric Flair, and then obviously the main event, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. So again, there was a couple of good matches, but there were some matches on here that I could have honestly done without. But as far as my rating for Survivor Series 1992, I'm gonna have to give it a solid 5.5 at best, man. And mainly that is because of the main event between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. So I'm gonna have to give it a solid, maybe 6 at best. So this is my review of Survivor Series 1992. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.